Hi, this is Sally Morgan, physical therapist, craniosacral therapist, and Tellington T-Touch practitioner for animals and people. This is Tristan. He's a Corgi, and we're here for an episode of Conversations with a Corgi. And I'm getting over whatever smuts I had, but I'm still a little feeble and coughing and congested. So today I'm going out later in the morning to see a horse who has a stifle problem. The stifle in the horse is this area here, which is the patella, the kneecap. This is the dog's kneecap, not on the front leg, because remember, if a dog was a human, he'd be standing up this way, and that would put his knee back here, not up here. And we all know where their elbows are, so I don't know why we can't figure out that their knee is not under their elbow on their front legs, but it is in the back right here. So in subluxing patella, in many small breeds such as Papillons, Chihuahuas, lots of the little terriers, some Corgis, we have the same kind of situation in horses. And I see this most often in chestnut horses, particularly mares, because the subluxing patella goes along with a general laxity in the ligaments throughout the whole body, which means the whole animal is not as tight as he could be. So things fall out of alignment a little easier because the ligaments are a little loose. So a couple of things going on with this horse. The person, the horse is owned by a person and her daughter. So the person describes what's going on as the horse popped a stifle. You know, we were riding her around and she popped a stifle, which kind of describes what happens, but there's a couple things with that phraseology. As we've learned from Linda Tellington, you have to be careful how you phrase things because animals really pick up on that kind of energy. So it almost sounds like we were riding her around and then she bucked her, you know, meaning the horse bucked the person, which is also not true. Usually when a horse bucks, it's because the saddle's too tight, the person did something, there's footing problems, whatever. The horses don't buck you. Horses buck to tell you something. Very big different way of looking at that. So the horse popped a stifle. So what that means for this horse, and I have to see it, and I hope I remember to record it, and I have reception there so I can. Apparently, kind of like with string halt, where the leg comes up behind the horse and he hops on three legs, which is another kind of neurologic problem that results in a spasm in the hind leg. This horse's leg is going straight out behind her. Now, we've seen with dogs, they kind of skip to my loo, hopping along, leg comes up, more like string halt in a horse, hop, 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 put the leg down. With this horse, the leg's going out behind her. Generally, this is incredibly painful in horses. Dogs don't seem to have as much pain as horses. Like you've seen the Chihuahua or the Jack Russell hop along, skip, 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 hop, hop, hop. Keep right on going after that ball, no problem. But I'm not convinced that it's not painful for them. So let's look a little more closely at the joint we're talking about here. We've got my Herman, named after Sally Swift's little rider Herman. And you might notice Herman's had some knee problems. This knee is completely held on with a twist tie. And when I picked him up this morning, this knee completely came off, which is actually kind of convenient. So you can see what we've got here on this bone is a little groove between the two condyles, the bumps on the end. And the knee itself, come here, Herman. Try to hold this so you can see it. Okay, so the knee itself moves back and forth in that groove. Now on Herman, the kneecap, this little bone, is actually attached to the bottom of the leg. But in a real animal or person, this is just a floating bone held down with tendons and ligaments that goes in that groove. When you've got a subluxing patella in a dog or a stifle problem in a horse, that is going off the groove, usually to the outside, but sometimes we see it to the inside. And what that does, as you can see with Herman here, that's going to break down the top of that condyle over time. And it's going to get very worn. The cartilage there is not going to be very smooth anymore from this constant breaking down. And then you end up with pain and problems like this horse isn't very old, but sometimes the kneecap will stay subluxed. for a period of time, and like a couple of minutes, and the horse has to move his leg to pop it back in, or the dog may turn and like bite at their back leg, or do weird things with their body to try to get it back in alignment. So several things need to be taken into consideration to fix this or help an animal that has this problem. First of all, in horses, this is not something that an amateur rider should be dealing with, because if it becomes painful, they can become violent. And if you don't ride a lot, that horse can easily buck you, i.e. unseat you. We had a horse at a team clinic once, a big gray mare. She wasn't very old. She had a serious problem with this, and she would stand with her head straight up, with her eyes fixed on the horizon, her nose level with the ground, not like this, how horses usually have it. And just shifting her weight in her hind legs would cause that kneecap to shift out of alignment. And the look on her face when it did, you could see her eyes widen, her nostrils widen, and then she would run and buck after a standstill. Now, to the person who was not very experienced, she thought the horse saw something on the horizon because of her posture, and then just took off when there was nothing there. So she was having the vets check her vision and blah, blah, blah. And because people didn't have time or whatever, no one noticed she had a stifle problem till she ended up at our clinic. And I think actually she ended up working with a team instructor in that area who recognized the problem as well. So in that case, that horse was dangerous for an amateur rider. So you have to make sure, first of all, that you've got some experience and that you ride every day in order to deal with this problem for your horse. And some of these things apply to dogs as well. One of the problems that this results from, and we see this a lot in runners and ballet dancers, but not as much as we used to. But ballet dancers have to stand with their legs turned out. So we'll try to use Herman's quote, good knee here. That means they're turned out at the hip like this, which if the person does not have good turnout in their hip, they end up torquing the knee, turning the knee out instead of the whole leg. And that creates a problem with the patella going over that condyle when it's not supposed to. So when I was working in sports medicine, tons of gymnasts and ballerinas particularly had this problem from trying to get the turnout. So to fix that, you need to have a good balance between the muscles on the front and the back of the leg. So in the human, we are all pretty familiar with the idea of the quads, the quadricep muscles, are the big muscles on your thigh. And you hear the phrase pull the hammy, but really the hamstrings are a set of 4 muscles, some of which are in pairs, down the back of the leg. So the balance between the quads and the hammies helps keep that knee in alignment. Herman's not edible biscuit. So one of the things we see in animals is that they, especially horses that are worked a lot, we don't see a good development of the hamstrings, the cheeks back here. So a good way to start that development is to walk the animal backwards. You have to do this super carefully. First of all, dogs don't naturally go backwards very easily, so you have to treat and use clicker training or something else to teach your dog to walk backwards. This is great for Jack Russells and Chihuahuas that have this problem. You can really make good improvements just by walking them backwards, like the length of the kitchen cabinets or something, which will take a little while to get used to. Therefore, I recommend dog dancing and some other dog sports where you have to walk backwards as a good thing to pursue. With horses, you can just put the halter on them and ask them to walk backwards. And you want a gradual hill, not 45 degrees, really, just barely a hill, because this is going to be really hard for them to do. And it's very important that you have some ability to watch your horse when you're doing this. You can't just run them backwards like we see in natural horsemanship all the time, snaking the rope and waving whatever, and the horse runs backwards. That is not helping build the hammies. You want to make sure the hoof is in straight alignment with the front hoof, and he's walking backwards step by step in alignment. So, all these natural horsemanship people say, oh, I walk him backwards all the time. You're not walking him backwards. I mean, what they're doing is better than nothing, but it is not consciously walking backwards to build those hamstrings up. So you've got to do that, maybe 20 feet to start, maybe on a slight hill. Almost every farm has a little bit of a hill. Better on a flat surface like a driveway than out in a field with big tufts of grass, because the hoof will sit on the tufts of grass and slide side to side, and you won't have that good alignment. So that's the first step. Walk your animal backwards if you have this problem. Second thing, make sure you get a good chiropractic visit in. The nerves to the stifle are in the L3-4-5 area, the low back. A lot of horses I see with stifle problems either have a dip there or a ridge there, indicating problems in their back. And often the horses I see that end up with this problem, there's problems going on further up the chain in their sacrum, their hips, or somewhere else. Also lower down in the hock. Bisky, stand you up a minute. Down here, this is the joint below the stifle, the hock, and the hip is up here. So the joints around the stifle, often there's something going on there where they aren't working 100%, and you end up with the stifle problem. I just saw a racehorse for somebody who had a pretty big hock problem, and there was residual problems in the stifle after the hock was injected. And we can do the conclusion that the hock problem was the original problem, and that the stifle problem developed as a result of the hock problem. Once the hock problem was addressed, the stifle problem can begin to be recovered. So chiropractic, get these joints moving up here, treat the upper part of this chain of the whole hind leg. This is actually, my sister and I both have seen Chihuahuas and Jack Russells, after 1 or 2 chiropractic visits, stop subluxing their leg when they're walking, and they no longer skip to my loo when they're trotting along. Some people think it's cute, but to me, it's, as a physical therapist and a T-touch practitioner, it is not cute to see less than ideal function in a body. So you've got the chiropractic, you've got the walking backwards. So particularly with horses, but you can do the same thing with dogs, you want to load the hind end in gait to try to improve the musculature in the whole back end. A lot of these horses I see that have stifle problems aren't ridden very often because the people think they have a problem and they don't want to ride them. And so they get weak in their hind end, especially if they're older horses, like in their teens or older, and that creates even more problems. I know Herman's kicking over here and you're concerned. So you need to ride them at a walk in particular, not so much cantering, if at all, for a long time every day, a good 40 minutes of walking. And if you only have a riding ring, riding in circles is not good for these kinds of problems, particularly when that stifle is on the inside of a circle, because animals have to walk with their hind leg up underneath of them as opposed to tipping over on a turn. If they're doing the tipping, again, you're creating the potential for that kneecap to slide over the outside condyle and sublux. So the person has to be a good balanced rider. They can't be thinking, oh my God, am I going to fall off? Am I on the correct diagonal? Am I posting funny? You know, how's my back? Are my heels down? They can't be thinking about any of that. They have to be such a good rider already that they can say, how is my horse balanced? See how Tristan just shifted back? You want the horse to shift back. You want to load the hind end. This is what you do in dressage. A lot of stifle problems I see in jumpers because not advanced jumpers, but beginning jumpers sometimes are really on their forehands when they come up to the jumps, and everything's happening up here. The back end's kind of floating around and it's not that strong. And then, you know, the person does higher jumps as they get more advanced, and then you've got problems in the hind end. So you want to load the hind end. And how do you do that? You're going to do something Linda Tellington and Sally Swift both called a half walk. It is not a collected walk, but it looks pretty similar. So you'll be taking your horse along on a regular walk, pretty loose rein, and then you're going to shift your pelvis under you, which is a half halt. Tristan can do it. There. See that? That's a half halt. And then you're going to take steps that are half the size of the steps that you were taking. If you are a good enough rider, and pray to God you are when you've got a horse with a stifle problem, you want to do like 4 regular steps, 4 half walk steps, 4 regular steps, 4 half walk steps, so that the horse is really intermittently loading the hind end. And you want to do this in walk so that the horse has time to coordinate where he is and how his feet are arranged so that he can keep that hoof straight. If he starts to turn out or turn in with those back feet, we're going to have the stifle problem. Next thing, no working on small circles. A lot of people, when they're training riders, have them work on small circles for riding lessons, getting ready to do hunters. If your horse is going too fast, it's a circle him. In dressage, we have 20 meter and 10 meter circles. We have voltees, all of that. You know, later down the line, you can do walking circles with your horse, but it is too hard in the beginning for that stifle and for the possibility of you doing something wrong. My horse sustained a stifle injury. He was doing jumps with a very inexperienced rider who was not allowed to ride him. But for some reason that day she was on him, and she was a screamer. Literally screaming whenever she was scared, which meant like most of the ride she was screaming, like literally screaming like only a 10-year-old girl can. So she was heading up to a jump, and we had baby bunnies all over the course at that point. And maybe there was a bunny, maybe she got scared, but she yanked on the inside rein and pulled my horse down a pretty steep hill in the canter. And when she did that, his back leg just pivoted in the ground, and that was the end of his stifle. I mean, even with all the experience and training I have in modalities and riding, that stifle was never right again. And he was in pain. He immediately left his leg in the air, and my sister had to take him to New Bolton. It was all a nightmare. But that's what can happen. So you want a balanced rider, and you want to keep the horse balanced, and you don't want to do sharp turns. So how you ride them matters. The fourth thing that I would suggest, and you can do this with dogs too, is set up a T-touch labyrinth. And, you know, that little maze where you walk in and around a bunch of right angle turns. And I would ask the animal to go through this very slowly, completely in square alignment all the way through, with several stops on the turns. We don't always stop a bunch on the turns, especially with dogs. And I would make that labyrinth pretty small for a dog, not using like a horse-sized one like we do sometimes, to try to, again, collect them. You want to engage the whole back end when you're doing this and balance them to the back. You might even hold a treat like back a little bit like this to get them to shift their weight back, because you want to build up muscle here, because the ligaments are not holding and the tendons are not holding that patella in alignment. So you have to rely on muscle. So a lot of recovery from stifle and patella problems is by building muscle to help hold that in alignment and prevent it from coming out of alignment. So with this horse I'm going to see today, will she be a great hunter? Will she be able to jump? Probably not. Not without a very experienced rider on her and going over low jumps. Well, sadly, low jumps are mostly jumped by inexperienced riders, because the potential of this getting very injured and then having an unpredictable horse with a young person on him, that's not a very good thing. So the horse could benefit from doing low-level dressage. The horse cannot do higher-level dressage, but low-level dressage, particularly in the French tradition where they teach a lot of collection early on, would be quite beneficial for this horse. Also for horses, and you can do the same thing with dogs, we do what we call in-hand work. So we're doing the same kind of thing that we were doing when we were riding the horse, asking for a half walk. Only you're going to do that while you're walking the horse. So you'll be leading them along, and then you'll collect them a little bit and ask them to take those small, short steps very carefully, and then walk on, and then little short steps. And you can do the same thing with your dog. I've been practicing this with Tristan for some of his dog dancing and his rally, where you're walking at a normal pace and then a slow pace. So I literally start marching in the slow pace, and I'm trying to teach him to march in place like this so that we can do some more different things with our dog dancing routine. And going from fast walk to slow walk and then me marching in place, he's starting to get it. You know, sadly, he doesn't understand English, and I can't just say, Tristan, march in place. But he does understand my body language really well, because he's a dog, so, and horses do too. So if you're marching in place, they will start to do it with you. It's raining. Oh no, not good for the arthritis. That's the truth. So those are a couple of pointers about what to do if you have a subluxing patella. A lot of us might not have that problem with our animals, but most of us, I'm sure, know or have seen animals with this problem. So refer them here, and I will try to post this in a couple of my Facebook groups where there's horse people too. So I'll let you know how it goes. I'm off tomorrow to the Cape again for a few days, so I don't know when I'll be back to do this. Probably maybe Tuesday, maybe later in the week. It depends on the weather and what's going on. My dog friends will be there, and depending on what they have going on, we may have some interesting things to talk about. So thanks for joining us today for this episode of Conversations with a Corgi, where we talked about subluxing patella, stifle problems, knee out of joint, pain in the knee, biscuit. Everybody have a great day. It's very hot here at last. It's finally summer. We have a week of 90s. Yay! But it's going to be 80 on the Cape. All right, bye-bye.